The G-Wagons were already outside when Emma dropped the flower. That was how it ended. Not with a confession, not with a gentle reveal over stale chin-chin on bakery steps, but with white powder exploding across cracked concrete and 3 black SUVs idling like judges outside a court she didn't know she was standing in. But that moment was still 30 days away. And before the ending, there was a beginning. And the beginning, like most Lego stories, started with a man who had too much and still wasn't satisfied. Omari Peters was 34 years old and exhausted in the way that only very rich people can afford to be. He owned 11 luxury towers on Victoria Island, a tech company that processed 40% of Nigeria's digital payments, and a penthouse so high above Lagos that on clear nights he could see the lights of Apapa Port blinking like a city that had no idea he existed. He had everything, and everything, he had discovered, weighed an enormous amount. It was a Tuesday evening when it happened, the moment that started all of it. Omari was at dinner with a woman his PA had described as refined and low maintenance, which in Lagos meant she had only checked her compact mirror 4 times before the appetizers arrived. Her name was Tiffany. She wore a dress that probably cost more than a teacher's annual salary, and somewhere between the lobster bisque and the grilled sea base, she had quietly pulled out her phone under the table and Googled him. He didn't say anything. He watched her expression shift, the small recalibration behind her eyes as the numbers loaded, and felt something inside him go completely flat. Like a tire. Like a phone at 1% with no charger in sight. He excused himself, went to the bathroom, stood over the marble sink, and stared at his own reflection for a long time. Then he walked back to the table, told Tiffany he had an emergency, paid the bill, all of it, without looking at the total, and went home. His PA, Kimmy, was still in the office when he arrived. She was 26, sharp as broken glass, and completely unimpressed by everything Omari owned, which was the main reason he kept her employed. She looked up from her laptop, took one look at his face, and said, "That bad?" She Googled me during the soup course. Kimmy didn't blink. "Classic. I'm done," Omari said, dropping onto the leather couch across from her desk. "I want to meet someone real. Someone who looks at me and sees a person." Kimmy tilted her head. "Have you considered that the problem is that you don't look like a person? You look like a net worth." He threw a cushion at her. She caught it. "I'm serious, Kimmy." "So am I, sir." She set the cushion down carefully. "You move in rooms where everyone knows who you are before you open your mouth. You can't find something real in a space that's already fake." She paused. Then, because she was Kimmy and she couldn't help herself, she smiled. "Besides, you couldn't survive 1 week as a regular Nigerian. You'd be begging to come home by day 3. Omari stared at her. Something ignited behind his eyes. "How much are you willing to bet on that?" Kimmy blinked. "Sir, 30 days, he said slowly, sitting up straight. "Obalende. Nothing but rags and 2,000 naira a day. No phone, no ID, no connections. I go in as a regular man, and I come out when the 30 days are done. That is the most unhinged thing you have ever said, and you once tried to buy a traffic warden. 30 days, Kimmy. I'll prove Lagos is full of real people. I'll find one who sees me, just me. If this story already has you hooked, hit like right now, drop a comment, Team Emma or Team Omari, and subscribe so other stories like this land straight in your feed. Let's go." Kimmy looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then she opened her drawer, pulled out 500,000 naira, and placed it on the desk between them. "Fine, I'll take that bet. And when you come crawling back on day 4 with mosquito bites and a damaged ego, I want a full written apology." Omari smiled for the first time in months. "Freeze all the Peters Holdings projects while I'm gone. Nothing moves without my direct approval." Kimmy frowned. "Sir, the Obalende land acquisition." "Nothing moves," he repeated. He packed that night. Or rather, he tried to. His first instinct was to bring his La Mer moisturizer, his silk sleep mask, and his noise-canceling headphones. Kimmy watched him pack all 3, waited until he zipped the bag, then opened it, removed each item one by one, and replaced them with a threadbare shirt, a worn pair of trousers, and a bar of key soap wrapped in a black nylon bag. "This is the assignment," she said simply, and closed the bag. He arrived in Obalende on a Wednesday morning with 2,000 naira folded in his pocket, a fake name, Delhi, and absolutely no idea what he was doing. The smell hit him first. Not unpleasant exactly, but layered. Exhaust fumes and frying akara and open gutters and something sweet underneath it all, like ripe plantain at the back of a market stall. Buses screamed past. Someone was arguing in Yoruba at a volume that suggested the entire street needed to weigh in. A woman balanced a full tray of tomatoes on her head and typed on her phone simultaneously without breaking stride. Omari stood on the pavement and felt, for the first time in years, completely invisible. He bought suya for dinner that evening. Or tried to. The Malam quoted him 800 naira for a small wrap, and Omari, defaulting to instinct, said, "Is that the best you can do? I usually negotiate a 15% reduction on first-time vendor relationships." The Malam stared at him. The three men behind Omari in the queue also stared at him. Omari paid the 800 naira without another word and walked away very quickly. He slept under a bridge that first night, listening to Lagos breathe around him. The distant generators, the call to prayer drifting from somewhere east, the sound of two people laughing in a language he didn't speak. He stared at the underside of the bridge and thought about his penthouse ceiling, which was white and smooth and completely silent. He hadn't noticed until now how much he hated silence. Day 2 was worse. He tried to introduce himself to a group of area boys who occupied a junction near a pepper soup joint. His approach was confident and firm, the same energy he brought to boardroom introductions. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm new to the area, and I'm looking to build some local relationships. Perhaps we could discuss a mutual arrangement." One of them stood up slowly. He was enormous. He had a scar across his left eyebrow and an expression that strongly suggested he had never once attended a corporate networking event and was not about to start. Omari backed away, then kept backing, then turned a corner and walked very fast for approximately 4 blocks before he felt safe enough to stop. He found the bakery on day 4 by accident. He had been walking since before sunrise, partly because he couldn't sleep and partly because moving felt better than lying still and thinking about how badly he had underestimated this. The street was quiet. Most of the stalls were still shuttered, but at the far end of the block, warm light spilled from a doorway, and the smell of fresh bread moved through the cool morning air like a hand extended in greeting. He followed it, found a low wooden delivery crate beside the bakery's side entrance, sat down, leaned his head against the wall, and closed his eyes. Just for a minute, he told himself. Just to rest. He woke up to cold water hitting him full in the face. He came up gasping, arms flailing, completely disoriented, and found a woman standing over him holding a garden hose with the calm expression of someone who had made a decision and had absolutely no regrets about it. She was maybe late 20s, medium height, with flour on her forearms and fire in her eyes, and the posture of someone who had been handling difficult situations since before she could properly pronounce difficult. "This is not a hotel," she said crisply. "It is not a lodge. It is not a B&B. Move your body before I call the boys from the junction." Omari sputtered. I just what? Woke you up? You're welcome. These crates are for bread, not for billionaires." She paused, looked him up and down, took in the dirty shirt and the cracked shoes and the general air of a man having the worst week of his life, or whoever you are. "Move." He opened his mouth, closed it, and then she did something he did not expect at all. She sighed, not cruelly, just tiredly, the way someone sighs when their conscience overrules their schedule, and disappeared back inside. She returned 30 seconds later with a brown paper bag and a small bottle of cold water, which she set on the crate beside him without making eye contact. "Yesterday's bread," she said. "Eat it or leave it. Either way, be gone before my first delivery at 7. She went back inside. The door swung shut behind her. Omari sat on the wet crate, soaking, holding a bag of day-old chin-chin and a bottle of water, watching the door she had walked through. And for the first time since he arrived in Obalende, he smiled. Not the polished smile he wore in boardrooms. A real one, confused and crooked and completely unplanned. Her name, he would learn later, was Emma, and she had no idea what she had just started. Her full name was Emma Okafor, but everyone on the street knew her simply as Emma, and that was more than enough. Names, she had always believed, should do one job well rather than 3 jobs poorly. She had been running her mother's bakery, Mama Okafor's fresh bread and pastries, for 3 years, ever since her mother passed suddenly from a stroke on a Thursday afternoon with 2 trays of coconut cakes still in the oven. Emma had pulled the cakes out, let them cool, packaged them, delivered them, come home, and then sat in the storeroom surrounded by flour sacks and cried for 6 hours straight. Then she stood up, washed her face, and opened the bakery the next morning at 5 a.m. because her mother had never missed a day and Emma was not about to let her down now that she was gone. She was not soft. Obalende had not been designed to produce soft people. But she was fair, and she was fiercely loyal, and she had her mother's particular habit of feeding people she was annoyed with, which was why the homeless man with the suspiciously good posture was now eating chin-chin on her delivery crate instead of being chased down the street. Omari came back the next day, and the day after that. Each time, Emma acknowledged him with approximately the same warmth she would extend to a persistent pigeon, not chasing him off, not welcoming him exactly, just tolerating his presence with a kind of resigned practicality. On day 6, she handed him a broom without explanation. He swept the front of the bakery. She gave him leftover meat pie. Neither of them discussed the arrangement. It simply became one. By day 8, he was helping with deliveries. This was, by any measurable standard, a disaster. The first morning she gave him the delivery list. He looked at the addresses with the confidence of a man who had once navigated the logistics of a 12-building real estate development across 2 states. He left at 7 a.m. with the van loaded and a hand-drawn map Emma had given him. He was back by 7:45, van still fully loaded, looking like a man who had experienced something that shook his foundations. "I got lost," he said. Emma looked at the van, looked at him. "You were gone 45 minutes. The road's here. The roads have been here longer than you have." She took the list from him, picked up her keys, and said, "Get in. I'm driving. You're carrying." He carried. She drove. She navigated Obalende's roads the way she did everything, with a complete absence of hesitation, turning down streets so narrow the van's side mirrors nearly clipped the walls, greeting shop owners by name, parking in spots that did not technically exist but somehow worked. Omari watched her from the passenger seat when she wasn't looking and tried to figure out what exactly it was about her that made him feel like he had been breathing incorrectly his entire life and was only now getting it right. It was on the 3rd delivery morning that the area boys found him again. They were at the junction near the pepper soup joint when 2 of them stepped into the road, the same enormous one from before, and a shorter, faster-looking companion who was smiling the smile of someone who had been waiting for a second chance. "Ah," the big one said softly, looking at Omari. "Now you be the corporate man way day, do big grammar for us the other day." Omari felt his stomach drop. Then Emma stepped out of the van. She walked past Omari like he was a lamppost, planted herself between him and the 2 area boys, and put both hands on her hips. "Chukwamika," she said to the big one flatly. "Your mother greets you and asks why you haven't visited since Christmas." The big one, Chukwamika, apparently blinked. Some of the menace evaporated from his posture. "Auntie Emma. Don't Auntie Emma me. Leave this one alone. He's my cousin from the village. He's not well in the head." She said this last part with a tone of complete clinical detachment, as though she were reading a medical report. Chukwamika looked at Omari. Omari, understanding that his survival depended entirely on committing to this story, let his mouth hang slightly open and looked at the sky with vague vacancy. "He looks normal," the shorter one said suspiciously. "That's the worst kind," Emma said. "He gets confused when strangers talk to him. It upsets him. His mother cried for 3 days the last time it happened." She shook her head sadly. "Very difficult for the family." Chukwamika studied Omari one more time. Omari continued to study the clouds. "Okay," Chukwamika said finally. "Make Una go." Then, to Emma, quieter, "That coconut cake you left for my mama last week. She said make I thank you. Tell her I'll send another one Friday." Emma said simply, and walked back to the van. Omari climbed in. They drove half a block before he spoke. "Did you just tell them I was mentally unstable to save my life? Would you prefer I let them rearrange your face? You told them I make my mother cry. Do you?" He opened his mouth, closed it. "Eat your chin-chin and be quiet," Emma said, and turned on the radio. And that was the end of the conversation. But something had shifted. Not dramatically. Emma didn't operate in dramatic shifts. It was quieter than that. Like the way morning comes, not all at once, but gradually. Light arriving by degrees until suddenly you realize you can see everything clearly and you don't know exactly when it happened. They started sitting on the bakery steps after closing time. It began on day 11, when Emma came outside to lock the side gate and found Omari sitting on the bottom step looking at the sky. She stood at the door for a moment, then sat down beside him with 2 cups of tea and said nothing. They drank the tea in silence. When she went inside, she didn't say goodnight, but she left the gate unlocked. He stayed another hour. By day 13, they were talking. "What did you do before?" Emma asked one night, both of them sitting on the steps with cups of Milo, the street quiet around them, a generator humming somewhere above them in a flat. "Philosophy," Omari said. He had been working on this character, Delhi, the failed philosopher, and found that it was surprisingly easy to inhabit. Perhaps because it wasn't entirely a lie. "I studied it. Thought I could figure things out with enough thinking. And thinking doesn't feed anyone." He looked at the ground. "I got tired of being theoretical, but by then I didn't know how to be anything else." Emma was quiet for a moment. "My mother used to say that the most useless man in a crisis is the one who only knows how to plan." She smiled slightly, not at him exactly, more at the memory. She said, "Give her the woman who just starts doing. She sounds like someone who got things done." She was the most practical human being I ever knew. Emma wrapped both hands around her cup. She built this bakery herself. No loan, no help. Saved for 11 years. The walls are not straight. She glanced at the building behind them. And the oven in Bay 2 has a personality disorder. But it's hers. Mine now. She paused. Some company wants to buy this street. Tear everything down. Build another tower nobody around here can afford to live in. Omari felt the shift in his chest immediately, a cold recognition, like touching metal in the harmattan. "What company?" he asked, careful to keep his voice level. "Peters Holdings." She said it flatly, the way you say the name of a disease. "Rich man's company. He probably doesn't even know this street exists, just sees a number on a spreadsheet." She shook her head. "My mother's name is on this building. I'm not moving." Omari looked at his hands that had signed the original Obalende acquisition proposal 14 months ago in a boardroom on the 40th floor, surrounded by architectural renders and ROI projections, and not a single photograph of a bakery with uneven walls and an oven with a personality disorder. He said nothing. What could he say? "You okay?" Emma asked, glancing at him. "Fine," he said quietly. "Just thinking." "See," she said, almost to herself, still theoretical. He laughed despite himself. She did too. Briefly, reluctantly, like a woman who had decided to ration her laughter and was annoyed at him for making her spend some unexpectedly. She stood up, collected both cups, and went inside. The gate stayed unlocked. Omari sat alone on the steps outside his own company's acquisition target, and for the first time in his adult life, felt the exact weight of a decision he had made from 40 floors up. Down here, at street level, where the walls were not straight and the generators hummed and the bread smelled like someone's mother, the numbers on the spreadsheet had faces. And one of those faces had just gone inside and left the gate open for him, which was the kindest and most complicated thing anyone had done for him in years. Day 16 was a Tuesday, and it arrived like a verdict. Emma was at the counter when the letter came, delivered not by hand but slipped through the bakery's front door slot. A crisp white envelope with the Peters Holdings logo embossed on the upper left corner like a small, expensive wound. She opened it the way she opened everything, without ceremony. She read it standing up. She read it twice. Then she put it on the counter, smoothed it flat with her palm, and stood very still for a long moment in the way that people stand when they are deciding what kind of person they are going to be about something. Omari was tacking bread trays in the back when she called him. "Deli, come." He came out, and she slid the letter across the counter without looking at him. He picked it up. Notice of formal acquisition and scheduled demolition. Property block 4-11, Obalende South. Possession date, to be confirmed. Beneath it, the signature of his VP, Adeola Mensah, in the clean, authoritative hand of a man who had never once had flour on his forearms in his life. Omari read every word. His face stayed still. He had trained it to stay still. Years of boardrooms and negotiations had built that particular muscle very well. But his hands, holding the letter, were not entirely cooperative. "They're moving faster," Emma said quietly. Her voice was steady, but her jaw was tight. "I thought we had more time." He set the letter down. "Is there a community response? Have any of the other shop owners?" "There's a meeting Thursday. At the junction. Everyone is scared." She looked at the walls of her bakery, the ones that weren't perfectly straight, and something moved behind her eyes that was too big and too old for the moment to contain. "My mother used to say this building wasn't built to last." Too much stubbornness in the foundation. A small, complicated smile. She meant herself, I think. Omari excused himself that evening, telling Emma he needed to check something at the other end of the street. He found a working payphone 2 blocks away. Called Kemi. The phone rang 4 times. Sir. Kemi's voice was sharp with relief and something else. Are you? Stop the Obalende project, he said immediately. Freeze everything. No communication with the landowners. No site surveys. Nothing moves. Silence. Then, sir, Adeola already sent the formal notice. The board voted while you were away. It was on the agenda. They said they couldn't wait indefinitely. Call the board. Tell them I'm calling an emergency session. Sir, they'll ask where you've been. They'll want you in person. And if you're not in that boardroom within the next, she paused, and he could hear her pulling up something on her computer. 72 hours. The process is legally too far advanced for a simple executive hold. We'd need a full board reversal. Omari pressed his forehead against the top of the payphone. 72 hours. He still had 14 days left on the bet, though the bet felt like a very small and embarrassing thing now compared to everything else it had set in motion. I'll figure it out, he said. Sir. Freeze what you can, Kemi. Please. He hung up and walked back to the bakery slowly, taking the long way, past the junction where Thursday's community meeting would happen, past the shops with their hand-painted signs, past the woman who sold groundnut from a glass case and greeted him every evening now with a small nod that felt, in its modest way, like an enormous gift. He thought about the architectural renders sitting in a folder in his office, the one that replaced all of this with glass and steel and a rooftop pool nobody who lived on this street would ever swim in. He didn't sleep that night. Day 20 arrived, and things between him and Emma were something that neither of them had named yet, which was perhaps because naming things made them real, and real things could break. It was an accident that accelerated everything. Omari had overheard Emma on the phone 2 days prior, losing a major catering contract to a bigger bakery because she couldn't guarantee the volume. He said nothing at the time, but he spent a day thinking, and then, using nothing but the business instincts he was trying not to have, he went to see the woman who ran the event planning shop at the top of the street. Her name was Blessing. She was 40-something and formidable, and she looked at Omari, in his dirty shirt and worn trousers, with the expression of someone who had seen stranger things and remained unimpressed by all of them. He sat across from her and, in the voice of a man who had once addressed shareholders in Nairobi, quietly explained why Emma's bakery was capable of delivering the volume and the quality for the contract she needed, and outlined exactly how a phased delivery schedule could make the numbers work. Blessing listened. When he finished, she said, "You don't talk like someone's cousin from the village." "I'm more functional on good days," Omari said. Blessing almost smiled. "Tell Emma to call me." When he told Emma that evening, her response was not gratitude. Her response was a long, searching look, the kind that doesn't start from the surface but goes straight through to the layer underneath. "How did you know about the contract?" she asked. "You were on the phone. The door was open. And you just went and... Deli, that woman has rejected my proposals 3 times. She's pragmatic. She needed a different angle." Emma kept looking at him. "Who are you?" she asked, and it was not entirely rhetorical. He held her gaze and said, "Someone who thinks you deserve better than you've been getting." And because that was the truest thing he had said since he arrived, it sat in the air between them with a weight that neither of them moved to lift. That night on the steps, she sat closer than usual. Not touching. Emma was not a person who touched casually, but close enough that when he turned to speak to her, their shoulders almost met. The generator above them cut out suddenly, and the street dropped into a darker, quieter version of itself. In the distance, someone was playing music, fella, low and unhurried, drifting from an upper window like smoke. "My mother loved this song," Emma said softly. "Tell me about her," Omari said. And Emma talked, really talked, the kind of talking that only happens in the dark when the city goes quiet, about her mother's hands that were always warm even in Harmattan, about the way she hummed while she kneaded dough, about how she died still believing this bakery would outlast everything. The developers, the politics, the rising cost of flour, all of it. About how Emma had promised herself, standing over those 2 cooling coconut cakes, that she would make that true. Omari listened with the full weight of his attention, which was the only thing he had given anyone freely in years, and felt something in his chest that he recognized dimly and distantly as the particular pain of caring about something you know you might break. Day 29 came too fast. He had planned the confession 30 different ways. He would sit on the steps. He would tell her his name first, his real name. He would explain the 30 days, the bet, the ridiculous, arrogant premise of it. Then he would tell her about the project, that it was his company, that he had frozen what he could, that he was going to fix it, all of it, starting the next morning from a boardroom where he would dismantle every resolution that had been passed in his absence. He rehearsed it until it was almost graceful. He did not account for 72 hours of silence from Kimmy, or for the fact that Obalende, his VP, was not a man who waited for grace. Day 30 arrived. 10 a.m. Sunshine. Emma was inside measuring flour for the morning's bake, singing something low under her breath. Omari was standing just outside the bakery door, both hands in his pockets, working up to the moment he had been building toward for 30 days. He stepped inside. "Emma," he started, "there's something I need to tell you." The sound came first. 3 engines, deep and synchronized, the particular sound of vehicles that cost more than most people's apartments. Then the squeal of brakes. Then silence. 3 black G-Wagons, lined up outside the bakery like a sentence. Obalende stepped out of the middle one in a gray suit and moved toward the bakery with the focused energy of a man executing a plan. Behind him, 2 assistants with tablets, a legal officer with a clipboard, and 4 men in the unmarked shirts of a site survey crew. Obalende spotted Omari through the open door and stopped. "Mr. Peters." His voice carried the relief of a man who had been trying to reach someone for days and had finally, inexplicably, found them standing in a bakery in dirty clothes. "Thank God. Sir, the board confirmed yesterday. Demolition can begin tomorrow. The survey team is here too." One of the bodyguards, instinct over instruction, stepped forward and draped a silk blazer over Omari's shoulders. The flour hit the floor like a small explosion. Emma stood behind the counter, the emptied measuring cup still in her hand, white powder settling around her feet like snow. She looked at the G-Wagons. She looked at the bodyguard. She looked at the blazer. She looked at Omari, at Deli, at whoever this person was standing in her bakery, wearing a silk jacket over a shirt she had washed for him twice. Her face did not crumble. That was the hardest part, the way it didn't crumble. It just went very, very still. "So," she said, and her voice was as flat and cold as the marble counter between them. "The man I fed for a month is the same man coming to bulldoze my life. Not a question, a reckoning. Emma, get out of my shop." She set the measuring cup down with precise, quiet care. "Take your convoy. Take your blazer. Take your charity." Her eyes met his once, fully, without flinching. "And take your philosopher nonsense with you." She walked into the back room. The door closed. It did not slam. That was the thing that followed him out of the bakery and into the back of the G-Wagon and all the way across Lagos to a penthouse he suddenly had no idea how to live in anymore. It didn't slam. She simply closed it, the way you close a chapter you have already finished reading and have no intention of opening again. The penthouse was exactly as he had left it. White ceiling. Total silence. The Lagos skyline spread out beyond the floor-to-ceiling glass like a painting of a city, beautiful, distant, and unable to feel anything. Omari stood in the middle of his living room in a silk blazer and dirty trousers and looked at everything he owned and understood, with the particular clarity that only loss produces, that none of it was the point. Kimmy was waiting. She had the look of someone who had run out of ways to be angry and had arrived on the other side at something quieter and more permanent. She didn't say "I told you so." She said, "The board meeting is in 40 minutes. Cancel it." She looked at him. "Cancel everything today, Kimmy. I need to think." "Sir, if you don't address the Obalende." "I said I need to think." He sat down on the couch that had never once felt as real as a set of bakery steps in Obalende at 11 p.m. He pressed both hands over his face. "She closed the door," he said, which was not a thing that required a response, and Kimmy, to her credit, did not give one. He sat there for an hour. Then he stood up, walked to his desk, and started working, not the way he usually worked, for profit or positioning, but with the quiet ferocity of a man paying a debt he had not known he owed until it was overdue. The first thing he did was call an emergency board session himself, arriving at the office still in the dirty trousers, blazer abandoned, and presenting a full reversal of the Obalende South acquisition with the calmness of someone who had already decided and was not interested in debate. Audio Lamensa argued. The board pushed back. Numbers were mentioned, projections, timelines, the cost of reversal. Omari listened to all of it and said, I own 58% of this company. The project is canceled. Find another location. He stood up. That's the meeting. The legal restructuring took 3 days. He worked through all 3, sleeping on the office couch, eating food Kemi ordered and left outside the door, communicating through lawyers and land officers and community liaisons. He engaged a property law firm to draft the document that would legally transfer ownership of the entire land block, properties 4 through 11, Obalende South, to a newly established community trust irrevocably, in perpetuity, with a clause that prevented any single entity from acquiring more than 10% for commercial development. He named it, with the quiet deliberateness of a man who knew exactly what he was doing, the Emma District. Then he bought the billboards. Not 1 or 2. Every outdoor advertising board on the 3-kilometer route between the main road and Emma's bakery, 14 in total. He called the agency at midnight, paid triple rate for the speed, and sent a single image for every board. A slightly blurred, slightly overexposed photograph that Kemi had taken on day 6 from a car across the street, showing a brown paper bag and a small bottle of water sitting on a wooden delivery crate outside the bakery. Below the image, in large clean type, the best meal a billionaire ever had. No logo. No company name. Just that. Emma saw them on day 3 of his absence, on her morning delivery run. She turned onto the main road in the van, and the first one appeared on her left. Large, impossible to miss. The image unmistakably her own brown delivery bags. She slowed without meaning to. Saw the second one. The third. She pulled the van over completely by the fourth, got out, stood in the morning traffic noise, and read the caption 3 times. Her driver, a young man called Femi who asked very few questions and had worked for her for 2 years, waited in the van and said nothing. Emma got back in, drove the rest of the route in silence, delivered everything on time, came back, parked, went into the bakery, stood at the counter for a moment. Then she sat down on the stool she kept behind the register and allowed herself, for the first time since the flour hit the floor, to feel something other than cold. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something adjacent to it. The legal documents arrived the following morning, delivered by courier with a cover note that contained exactly 2 sentences in Omari's handwriting. This should have been done before I came. I'm sorry it took me this long to understand why. Emma read the document 3 times, the same way she'd read the demolition notice, smoothing it flat on the counter with her palm. But her hand wasn't shaking this time. She put it down, picked up her phone, and stared at it for a long moment. Then she put it back down and went to start the morning bake. He showed up at 5 a.m. on a Saturday. She heard something in the bakery before she saw him. A small crash, then a muffled word she was fairly certain was not appropriate, then the unmistakable sound of someone who did not know what they were doing aggressively attempting to do it anyway. She came through the back door and stopped. Omari Peters, who owned 11 luxury towers and a digital payments company and a penthouse with a ceiling like a cloud, was standing in her bakery covered from shoulder to elbow in flour, attempting to knead a mound of dough with the concentration of a man defusing something. He was wearing his old dirty rags, the same threadbare shirt and worn trousers from Obalende, and he was entirely, comprehensively terrible at what he was doing. He didn't turn around. I fired the billionaire, he said. His voice was careful, like something rebuilt after damage. He was a jerk. The philosopher is back. He's wondering if you need a delivery guy. Very fast. Gets lost easily. Emma stood in the doorway and said nothing. She looked at the dough, overworked, probably ruined, and at his flour-covered hands, and at the ridiculous, earnest, irreversible sincerity of a man standing in a place he had almost destroyed, trying to do the smallest possible useful thing. Something in her chest moved. Quietly. The way foundations shift, not breaking, just settling into a new position. You're still a terrible baker, Omari, she said finally. He let out a breath. I know. You're late. I know. She walked past him to the second workstation, tied her apron, and began to assess the damage he had done to the dough. Get the hose, she said. The crates outside need washing. She paused, hands in the dough. And if you think this means you're living here for free, you're confused. Rent is $200,000. And you wash the van on Saturdays. Omari looked at the hose, looked at the crates, looked at the woman beside him who had fed a stranger, faced down area boys, protected her mother's walls, and closed a door without slamming it because she had too much dignity for theatrics. Deal, he said quietly. You want to get the hose. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning that smelled like fresh bread and harmattan and wet concrete, a neighbor passed the bakery and paused at the sight of a man in a 5 million naira Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, scrubbing a greasy delivery van with a bucket of soapy water and the focused expression of someone who had been given a task and intended to complete it correctly. On the delivery crate beside the van, Emma sat eating a cupcake, watching. You missed a spot, she said. Which one? She gestured broadly. All of them. He looked at the van, looked at her, looked at the watch, now covered in suds. This watch costs more than this van. And yet, Emma said simply, and took another bite of the cupcake. He laughed. She did too, fully this time, without rationing it. The laugh she kept for things that were actually funny, which in her experience were rarer and more valuable than most people understood. Above them, the street was waking up, generators starting, traders arriving. The smell of akra from the junction mixing with the bread cooling on the bakery racks inside. The sign above the door read what it had always read, Emma Okafor's fresh bread and pastries. Below it, someone had added a small hand-painted line, EST with love. Still standing. Omari kept scrubbing. Emma kept watching. Legos kept moving, the way it always had, loud and relentless and full of people who did not know each other yet, but soon would. This is the story of a man who had everything and went looking for something real, and found it not in a place he designed, but in a place he almost destroyed. It is a story about the difference between knowing someone's value and actually seeing them. About how the most important things, a bag of yesterday's bread, an unlocked gate, a door closed without a slam, are so small they are easy to miss from 40 floors up, and so enormous they can restructure a life when you finally stand at the right height to see them. The lesson is not that money is bad. The lesson is that money, wielded without presence, without paying attention, without the willingness to be on the ground and get flour on your hands and get lost in someone else's neighborhood, that money makes you powerful and invisible at the same time. And invisible people, no matter what they build on sand. Omari went to Obalende looking for a woman who could see him. What he found was a mirror. What he chose to do with what he saw in it. That was the actual story. Emma did not fall in love with a billionaire. She fell in love with a man who, when given the choice between his tower and her crates, picked up the hose. That is the whole of it. Thank you for spending 40 minutes in Obalende with Omari and Emma. If this story meant something to you, please like this video. It helps more people find it. Subscribe so you never miss a new story. And drop in the comments the one moment that hit you hardest. The bread bag, the flour, the door that didn't slam. I want to know. See you next week. And remember, the best meal you'll ever have might come in a brown paper bag from someone who didn't even like you yet.